Greetings, welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel. I made a last-minute editing decision on this carving a bateau boat model series and decided to split what I had intended to be the first part into separate parts. So this is a separate introduction to the second part. What we're going to lay out, as you can see it's already been done at the point that I'm making this intro, the Cajun cypress bateau onto this block of wood. So if you haven't had a chance to see the first part, which is the introduction to this type of model making as well as the history of this boat, I'll put a link up at the top of the screen right here so you can go watch that and then come back and see how we do the layout for the model. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's dive in and lay out the next one that I want to draw. I mentioned that the bateau design was taken to Cajun country, and we get the pirogue. We also get this thing, and this I can actually show you the whole picture because I drew this. This is the Cajun cypress bateau. This is the Cajun cypress bateau. I've got the Wilson look here going on. Also sometimes called a putt-putt boat, right? This is the up until recent times where there were good highways, this was the aquatic pickup truck of southern half of Louisiana, right? The putt-putt boat. It is very much derived from the lines of the bateau form, but it has a square stern and square bow. Okay, so it's squared off in both directions. And that makes sense with the swampy territory to have it sort of a hybrid between a bateau and a skiff. Right? So it makes a lot of sense considering the purpose it was being put to. Now, this, when I was searching for lines for this boat, I couldn't find anything that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted something in the middle range. They were 20 to 30 feet long. Most of them were at least 20 or a little bit longer than 20. I wanted 25 feet for this model, and the historic ones all have very upswept. And I could find some like modern plywood boat plans that were available, that had some study plans available, but they were much more squared off than the historic examples. So I got some photographs of historic examples and some of those modern study plans and drew a new set of lines, which was kind of a compromise between all of them and a different scale than any of them, because none of them were 25 feet, and I wanted to draw a 25-foot boat. So what I'm going to draw, that's why I can show it to you, because it's a new set of lines, a new design, rooted in photographic documentation of historic boats and some of like the overall like length to width ratios of the modern plans. And this is the block of wood that I made up to do this in. And it is, I needed a little bit more than 2 inches, and I didn't have any 3-inch lumber. I didn't need a full 3-inch, so I just took a 3/4 inch piece and glued it on to a piece of 2x, clamped it up. So this piece, this is a composite board, just because I'm cheap and I didn't want to go spend money on this, not because I'm using that line as any kind of reference point in this particular build. Now, the first thing I need to do is I need to take the grid that you see here. Okay, is this piece of construction paper in the view? Okay, good. So I need to take this grid and I need to transfer it to this piece of lumber, and the easiest way to do that is just very simply to lay it down on and make a couple of tick marks. Boat builders will often resist making a lot of measurements. Once they have their lines drawn to the scale that they want, they will take a tick stick, which is just a batten, and they'll hold it and they'll mark marks right on the tick stick. That way you're not making errors in measurement with a ruler. Okay. Now, I'm not going to do that. I am going to do this with a ruler, but I will show you just this idea of making ticks like that here in the first stage. It is very convenient. And I'm just going to transfer these lines all the way around the board. With this speed square. These aren't the best, this is not the best style of square for most fine woodworking, but for just laying some stripes across a piece of 3x4 here, it's perfectly good. There's our layout grid. Okay? So we have that all the way around. How's our battery life doing?
Not great.
Not good?
Not good.
Okay, stop it and switch back. Okay, sorry for the hiccup. When I was looking at this, I saw that this little bit of split wood was going to interfere with my original layout. So I just planed down the back and reoriented how the boat goes in the board here a little bit and redrew these lines. So nothing new. You didn't miss anything, I promise. I do need one more line, but that was just a little bit of a working around a problem in the board. I jokingly call this my scrapwood armada, my little collection of these boats, because most of them are made from cut-offs and scrap woods and stuff. And you know, again, it's a skill building project. It's a chance to get in and dig in and work with some materials and work with some different ideas and see what you come up with there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, if you're making a presentation model, don't make these out of scrap wood. Unless you have really nice scrap wood, I guess. But for these builder models, it just has to work. Okay, so now we're going to do the layout for the shear line and the bottom line in the profile view. And I'm just going to measure up. This is 60 millimeters. And I do like to use metric for this because most of the time there's some calculations involved. And it is much easier to do those calculations, 53, in a base 10 system. So it vastly simplifies things if you use metric. 45. This is 42, a little bit strong. Same measurement. This is sweeping up again a little bit. This is 44. Stern. Okay. Now, to draw that line, we have a flexible curve. When you do this full scale, you'll use a batten and ducks. They're called drafting ducks, and they're a little lead weight. There's a little wire that sticks out like that. And a lot of them do kind of flare a little bit, and they kind of look like ducks. For scale work, I like to use one of these flexible curves, okay, for some things. You can also use a French curve for really tight curves, but there aren't any of those in this boat, so this is the only tool I need. And what this is it's a thick, flexible plastic tube, rectangular tube, that has a little piece of metal in it so it will hold its shape when you bend it. Okay? So what we can do is we can just start playing connect the dots with these lines, and then slowly bend our curve up so that we make a nice even arc between all of the lines. And then we trace it. Okay. Now, the downside to using these is sometimes it will have a little bit more memory than you want. And it'll have a little kink in it from a previous use. So if that happens, just kind of come down and do it a second time. You can kind of average out those little errors. Okay. Just going to trace over that in a couple spots where it was a little on the light side. In this section, just need to true that up a little bit through that spot. Okay, so there you have your first line. Now we're going to measure the bottom. The stern comes back at a straight angle, 1 centimeter. So come in 1 centimeter. And that I can just draw with the ruler. Okay. Now, this intersection and that intersection are right at the water line. But this comes up four millimeters. So there's that intersection. Since I don't really have any curve to speak of, I can draw this with a ruler as well. There is a little bit of the curve in the rocker at this point right here. Am I still in the view, hon? Okay. There's a little bit of curve in the rocker at this point, but that I'll just, it's not measurable at this scale, so I'll just smooth it with sandpaper right there. And that's fine for this kind of modeling. That's why you can get away with study plans for making one of these, because if there's any ambiguity, you can kind of average out and fix it with sandpaper, right? That's why study plans are fine for making a small model like this, but not fine for building a whole boat. Now we need to work on the bow. So we have this little piece that angles back, and it angles back 4 millimeters and down 7.5 millimeters. Come down 7.5, and then in 4. There's my first point. If you look at the historic photos, pretty much all of these have coming in from the bow, they always have like a flat board, and then it curves from there. Okay. And this is where they differ from the plans that are available for plywood models. This is one of the big points of difference, other than length. Because most of the plywood models, they don't have a curve there. They just make it a second angle. And I wanted the more historic form. So at the next mark, we are 29 millimeters. The next mark where we meet the bottom, we are 4 millimeters, 2 millimeters. 4 millimeters there, and 2 millimeters there. So again, this is not a measurable difference. So I'll just mark that with a straight edge and then curve it a little with sandpaper. And this curve is going to get a flexible curve treatment. Okay. And if one of your points, like that point, doesn't quite measure out to the even curve, the fair line is priority over the measurement because paper can expand and contract even in a very short period of time. Especially in weather like we're having where we're going back and forth between heating and non-heating. Right? So what you drew one day and what traces out on the wood the next, there's error there. That's also why, even once we get into the period of time where boat builders are designing on paper first, they're always making models because this is a more rigid, durable reference to go back to than your paper plans. Okay? There. So now we have this whole profile drawn. Now we'll do the profile on the top. Okay, that's going to come from this bottom set of lines. So this is my top, and that's my bottom profile. So my top profile at the bow is 34. Forgot to strike that line through up top here. First grid line, first station line. These cross sections here are called stations. The first station line, back from the bow, 51. And this is tracing a little bit into this crack, but that's okay because we're going to way undercut that when we cut out the profile. So I'm not worried about that at all. It's a good use for that highly mediocre piece of wood. Next station, 56. Double check it. Yep. Next station, 50 even. I got off on that. 50 even here. Yes. At the stern. 39. Yes. 39, 50. I need to double check this one. 56. Yeah, that's the one I was off on. This one, 51. Those two I kind of flip-flopped a little bit. And that one I just don't need. measure there, since I have the mark. .47. Right in the crack. Okay, there we go. Now, flexible curve. They're really nice tools. Again, having your nice fair line is priority over exactly meeting one of your points. So trust your flexible curve and average out across the points if you need to. Legitimate for models. Okay. Now another way you can do this, if you don't have one of these aren't super expensive. They're, scale of $12. I know Blick sells them. Any large art supply will sell these things. But if you have a flexible ruler like this, you can use it as a batten, and you can have one person hold it and then a second person trace along it. That will work as well if you have a second pair of hands to help you out. So there's our top profile. Now we're going to do the bottom profile. Now here's where it really pays to have measured everything, to have labeled everything, because it's really easy to cross your wires when you start flipping these around. Stern, stern. .38. That one's 28. This one is 38. Okay. Said it wrong and did it right. Next mark. 40. Again. And at the bow. 34. Okay. There's our marks. You just kind of have to work this along. You can't hold the whole thing down and draw against it without it moving on you a little bit. Just draw in little 4-inch sections all the way along. And there we have our line. Okay? So that is the layout complete. Here's our bottom. Right, there's our bottom, our side, and our top. So again, just like with the other one, we'll cut out along the top. Okay. Then we will cut out this profile, leaving that wood in place. Then we'll connect the top with the bottom line and cut out that triangle of wood. And then we will work in on, and probably have to remeasure a couple times, this little stuff in here, but we can do that with a hand knife and a rasp later on. So the rest of this will be removed with a draw knife, and we will go and head out. I'm going to ink this so that it's easier for you to see in the film, and then we will reconvene in our temporary wood shop and do a little drawn off working on this blank.